Andrew Jackson, the 7th U.S. president, the guy on the $20 bill. He's a man who, to some, was a hero of the people, and to others, an absolute tyrant. Today, we're going to unpack the story of a president whose legacy is, well, it's still a total battleground in American history.
So, which was he? Was Andrew Jackson this great champion of the common man, the symbol of a new, rising American democracy? Or was he actually an authoritarian ruler who just trampled the law to expand his own power and cause unbelievable suffering? The truth, as you're about to see, is really, really complicated, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into. Okay, so look at this. This slide gets right to the heart of the paradox. On the one side, you have this champion of democracy, the founder of the Democratic Party, the first president who wasn't born into that East Coast aristocracy, a true self-made man. He fought for the common man, and he even preserved the federal union during a crisis. But then, you look at the other column, and it's like a completely different person. The architect of the Indian Removal Act, a man who got rich from the labor of hundreds of enslaved people, a president who openly defied the Supreme Court.
So, to really get who this guy was, you have to go back to the beginning. Jackson wasn't born with a silver spoon. He was literally forged by the violence and hardship of the American frontier and the Revolutionary War.
I mean, his early life is just incredible. Think about this. By the time he was 14, the American Revolution had taken his entire immediate family. He was an orphan with this deep, lifelong hatred of the British. He completely clawed his way out, becoming a tough-as-nails frontier lawyer. But his real path to fame? That was through the military. His absolutely stunning victory over the British at the Battle of New Orleans in 1815 made him a national hero, like overnight. They called him Old Hickory, the tough, unbending patriot who beat the old enemy.
And of course, that kind of military fame is the perfect launchpad for a political career, right? Jackson took all that popularity and channeled it into this brand new kind of populist movement that was about to completely reshape the country.
And this quote, man, this just nails his whole appeal. He was speaking directly to the working class, the farmers, the mechanics, the laborers. He was basically saying, hey, the government is rigged against you by a bunch of rich elites, and I'm on your side. He made himself their defender, their voice in a system that they felt had totally ignored them.
For his supporters, that whole idea of a rigged system felt 100% real in 1824. So Jackson wins the popular vote for president, but he doesn't get enough electoral votes. The election gets thrown to the House of Representatives, and a deal gets cut that makes John Quincy Adams president instead. Well, Jackson's camp just explodes. They're screaming, "Corrupt bargain!" And that feeling of being cheated, that outrage is what powered him to a massive landslide victory 4 years later in 1828.
So once he's in the White House, Jackson has a #1 target on his list, the Second Bank of the United States. Now, to him, this wasn't some neutral government agency. It was a private, incredibly powerful corporation that basically controlled the nation's entire money supply. He saw it as a monster that only served to make the rich even richer.
And listen to this. This shows you just how personal this fight was for him. This wasn't just a policy debate. As he told his vice president, it was a life-or-death struggle. He saw the bank as this enemy that was actively trying to destroy him, and he was absolutely determined to destroy it first.
And he did it. He went right for the kill. First, he vetoed the bill to keep the bank going. Then, he ordered all the government's money to be pulled out of it. And just like that, the bank was dismantled. By killing the bank, Jackson didn't just win a political fight. He fundamentally changed the power of the presidency, arguing the president was the true representative of the people's will.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a really dark turn. Because that same raw power, that same unbending will he used to destroy the bank was also turned against some of the most vulnerable people in America. In 1830, Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, and we have to be crystal clear about what this was. This wasn't some kind of negotiation or treaty. It was a federal law authorizing the forced displacement of tens of thousands of Native Americans from the lands their ancestors had lived on for generations.
The scale here is just staggering. We're not talking about a small group of people. We're talking about entire nations, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, and others being forcibly ripped from their homes in the Southeast. It was a state-sponsored campaign of displacement that, many historians today just call it what it was: ethnic cleansing.
And the result was one of the most shameful chapters in American history, the Trail of Tears. These weren't peaceful moves. They were brutal, forced marches over hundreds of miles. Thousands of men, women, and children died from disease, from starvation, and from exposure. It's an absolute stain on the nation's past.
Historian Howard Zinn really doesn't mince words about it.
What was officially and blandly called Indian removal back in the 1830s would be given a much, much more sinister name today. It really puts into perspective the brutality of the policy.
And then there's the massive contradiction of slavery. Jackson's whole vision of democracy and freedom, well, it was for white men, period. He himself was a wealthy plantation owner. Throughout his life, he owned hundreds of enslaved people. And he wasn't just a passive owner. He actively participated in the domestic slave trade, buying and selling human beings.
So we're left with these two completely irreconcilable pictures of the same man. How are we supposed to make sense of this? How do you weigh a legacy that contains both the expansion of democracy for some and the brutal, violent oppression of others?
This final chart just lays out the whole dilemma, doesn't it? The central problem of his legacy is that you just can't separate his acclaimed achievements from his condemned actions. The things he's praised for, like expanding voting rights for white men or killing the national bank, came at the direct and brutal expense of Native Americans and enslaved African Americans.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty difficult question. And this isn't just about history books, right? It's about us now. How should a nation remember a leader with such deep and painful contradictions? Because who we choose to honor and the stories we choose to tell about them, well, that says as much about our values today as it does about the past itself.